President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. gave his instruction to me to suppress the criminal activities and impunity in the entire island of Negros and to give justice to the families and loved ones of those who were slain in the assassination of Governor Ruel de Gamo and restore normalcy and confidence of our people in the area.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
There has been another encounter between Chinese ships in the West Philippine Sea and our Coast Guard. As a Philippine Coast Guard plane carrying journalists flew over the Spratly Islands, a Chinese voice issued a stern command over the radio: leave immediately. The order came from a radio operator on a Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3,500 feet below one of dozens of ships seen patrolling the area.
During the 4-hour flight in the Cessna Caravan, Philippine Coast Guard personnel identified nearly 20 Chinese vessels, including suspected maritime militia boats, in waters around some of the 9 islands and reefs occupied by the Philippines. 17 Chinese maritime militia boats were also spotted by the Philippine Coast Guard near Sabina Shoal, while 15 Chinese maritime militia boats were seen in the vicinity of Thitu, the largest Philippine-occupied island, which lies about 430 kilometers from Palawan. Last month, a Chinese Coast Guard boat was nearly 20 kilometers from the shoal when it allegedly used a military-grade laser light against a Philippine patrol boat. The Foreign Affairs Department has already filed a diplomatic protest on the matter, while President Bongbong Marcos summoned Chinese Ambassador to the Philippines, Huang Xilian, to discuss the incident.
Here to give us their reaction regarding the latest incident in the West Philippine Sea between China and the Philippines, we have with us on the line PCG Maritime Security Advisor Commodore J. Tariella. Good evening and welcome to the big story, Commodore Tariella.
Good evening, Sir Roby, and good evening, Ms. Gretchen.
Sir, your thoughts on this latest incident, in particular that warning and demand by the Chinese agents to leave for the Philippine plane to leave the area, and also, I mean, is this becoming more frequent?
Thank you, Sir Roby, for your question. But before I respond to that, I would like to confirm that the Philippine Coast Guard had an MDA flight yesterday over Ayungin Shoal, Pag-asa Island, and Sabina Shoal. And it is true that we also monitored some Chinese maritime militia and PLA Navy vessel and Chinese Coast Guard in the territorial seas in Pag-asa Island. And at the same time, we also flew over Ayungin Shoal. We also noted the presence of the China Coast Guard, and also in Sabina Shoal, we have observed 17 Chinese maritime militia. But what is notable with our MDA flight is that we noticed that there is significant decrease of the number of Chinese maritime militia. For example, in Pag-asa, last Saturday, we reported there were like 42 Chinese maritime militia. But yesterday, there were only 15 of them. And also in Ayungin, 2 weeks ago, we reported that there were Chinese maritime militia there, but anchored within the shoal. But there are no more militia anchored there. And then for Sabina as well, 2 weeks ago, we observed there were 26. Now there are only 17. So,
Hello, Commodore Tariella?
Yes, hello?
Yes, naputol lang po kayo, but let me just follow up. So, kumonti yung nakita nyo doon na vessels. Does that necessarily indicate a trend, or is this probably just something as part of the routine and the regular positioning of Chinese vessels? In other words, do we expect that to continue? Are we expecting the numbers to go up again after a number of weeks or days?
Since this is only the second time that we follow up in observing the number of Chinese maritime militia, we cannot still ascertain whether there is a significant decrease. But hopefully in the next coming weeks, as we continue our MDA flight in monitoring the Chinese maritime militia in the West Philippine Sea, probably we can say that there is an increase or significant decrease of the Chinese maritime militia. But in the past weeks, I think it is very important for us to note that the Philippine Coast Guard, in support of the intention of our president and through the approval of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, has been become more transparent. We are exposing this presence of the Asia. So, with best, whether publishing other evidence and presence of Chinese maritime militia is effective or not.
All right, sir, you spoke about going against gray zone tactics. You talked about operating in the black and white. What exactly do you mean by that?
I spoke in the ADRI event the other day as an academic. What I'm saying there is that, the effect of the Chinese Coast Guard strategy in the West Philippine Sea is more of the gray zone. Gray zone in a context that it is short of war, but it can also be construed as a basic law enforcement. So there's a gray area that the Chinese has been doing. For example, we cannot really say that the utilization of the Chinese Coast Guard or the Chinese maritime militia is just focused on law enforcement or basically, engaged in fishing. They are using, obviously, these vessels to assert their presence in the West Philippine Sea. But of course, you cannot also say that this is already a form of aggressive action in the part of the People's Republic of China. So that gray area is something that we have to understand in order for us to come up with a better strategy in the West Philippine Sea.
But Commodore, in terms of understanding it, that's already... how do we do it when we proceed on the assumption that we do already understand that their Coast Guard is really of a different nature to our Coast Guard? Our Coast Guard is clearly civilian in nature. They are clearly positioning their Coast Guard clearly in this gray zone. What else is there to understand? And more importantly, once we take a position on what that means and what stance they're taking, does that limit our options?
Well, based on my presentation as an academic the other day, I would argue that the best way for us to address the Chinese gray zone activities in the South China Sea is to expose it. If we keep on exposing the behavior and aggressive action of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels and the Chinese maritime militia, from there we can already tell the world that they are not utilizing their vessels, particularly their white ships, in accordance with the international law. And of course, through the exposure of harassment of the Chinese maritime militia as well, and their swarming strategy in a particular area, we can also be able to put a spotlight that this is just a shadow of their intention of occupying a particular territory in the South China Sea.
Sir, is it safe to say...
Yes.
Sir, is it safe to say that there's also a lot that we don't know yet? If you're exposing it now, publicizing all of these encounters, has a lot happened in the past that we don't know of?
Well, Ms. Gretchen, when we say gray, this is just, we cannot really label it as a black or white. No, hindi natin masabing this an aggressive action or this just purely law enforcement. What they're doing is to confuse us, whether to categorize it as an act of aggression or not considered as an act of aggression. So if your question is, do we know exactly what they are doing to call it as a gray zone? I think so. The mere fact that the Chinese Coast Guard, we know that as a Coast Guard universally has to enforce maritime safety, and yet their Chinese Coast Guard vessel is, violating the collision regulation, doing dangerous maneuver. This is against the international law. So,
Commodore? We seem to have lost Commodore Tariella there, but in any case, maraming salamat po. The big story abroad, Russia showered Kiev, Lviv, and other major cities across Ukraine with what officials said was an unprecedented barrage of missiles. A total of 81 missiles were used in a massive attack on Ukrainian infrastructure, including 6 ballistic missiles that have the ability to elude Kyiv's air defenses. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky listed 10 regions across Ukraine where aerial attacks took place. He said the attacks hit critical infrastructure and residential buildings. At least 11 people were killed, more than 20 injured during the overnight attacks, according to preliminary information from regional authorities.
More of today's headlines when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
Authorities raided properties of Negros Oriental Representative Arnie Teves over alleged loose firearms.
But the CIDG denies that search had any connection to the murder case of Governor Roel Degamo, in which the congressman was recently implicated. Justin Punsalang with the big story.
At past 5 in the morning on Friday, employees of the Teves family were surprised when authorities barged into the house of Representative Arnie Teves in Bayawan City, Negros Oriental. The warrants were addressed to Congressman Arnie and his 2 sons, Kurt Matthew and Axel, and were issued on law enforcement's belief that grenades, high-powered firearms, and ammunition are stashed in the Teves home. A lawyer was present to receive the search warrant, but the lawyer and the employees were not allowed by the police to witness the search. They were also not allowed to take photos and videos to document the raid. Instead, they were asked to move away from the house. Other staff of the Teves says were closely guarded by the police.
Kakain lang kami ng manok. Paano namin hindi kasali sa mga ganitong bagay. Katrabaho lang kami.
3 search warrants were served in Bayawan City, while another 2 was implemented in the municipality of Basay, where the lawmaker has a resort. Based on a CIDG report, a grenade, 3 pistols, and live ammunitions were recovered at the resort. A certain Jose Palo Gimarangan, living in the house, was arrested for illegal possession of explosives, unregistered firearms, and ammunition. In a Facebook Live days ago, Congressman Teves said that the police revoked his gun license. He has surrendered some, but still has a few in his possession. He promised to turn in the unlicensed firearms when he arrives from the trip abroad.
Pagbalik ko, agad-agad isusurrender ko na ang aking mga baril. Ngayon, hindi ko pa nga alam kung ano yung tamang proseso. Kailangan ko ba kumuha ng permit to transport? Dahil baka hulihin ako sa daan habang papunta sa pag-surrender ng aking mga baril sa nearest police station.
Meanwhile, Teves' legal counsel attorney Ferdinand Topacio questions why police did not allow witnesses to observe the raid.
Kung wala kang balak gawing masama, bakit kailangan palamasin mo lahat ng mga tao dun sa bahay? Bakit hindi mo immediate pakita mo, room by room, ito, nagse-search kami, ito. Oh.
Congressman Teves and 5 others are facing murder complaints over killings perpetrated back in 2019. The representative is also being implicated in the murder of Negros Oriental Governor Roel Degamo. However, the CIDG clarified that their operation has nothing to do with Teves' alleged link to the ambush.
Ito po ay pursuant doon sa aming project ng CIDG, flagship project na Oplan Paglalansag Omega.
Which is?
Against po sa mga illegal firearms.
May relasyon po ba ito sa pagkamatay ni Governor?
Hindi po namin, wala po.
News 5 reached out to the Degamo family for their reaction on the recent raids on the Teves' properties. They refused to comment for now. Meanwhile, House Speaker Martin Romualdez is urging Congressman Teves to come home from the U.S. as soon as possible. Teves was supposed to return home on Thursday but opted to extend his trip in the wake of his alleged involvement in the Degamo murder. For News 5, Justine Punsalang. We are One News.
To give us more clarity about this raid, we have CIDG Chief Public Information Officer Marisa Bruno over the phone. Good evening, Colonel. Welcome to the big story.
Good evening, Sir Roby and Ma'am Gretchen. Good evening to the viewers of the One News TV.
Ma'am, ang bilis po ng mga pangyayari at saka sunod-sunod. First, there were the charges for the 2019 murders and then the implication of the Teveses to the Degamo assassination. Now this raid, and yet officials are saying coincidence lang lahat to. I mean, are we getting that clear from the police? All of this is just a coincidence?
Dito po sa isinagawa po natin na pagkasampa ng kaso, laban po kay Congressman
Teves.
Kay Congressman Teves, itong nakanang araw lang po. Ito ay pagpapatuloy po ng ating CIDG. Alinsunod po sa pinag-uutos ng ating Chief PNP para po sa intensify nating police operations at lalo-lalo na po ito po ay sa pagtupad ng ating mandato patungkol po o laban po sa mga illegal na baril at kaya kung saan pinag-favor po natin ang patuloy na operasyon at ito nga po tayo ay nagsagawa nitong o nag-implement nitong search warrants po particularly po against kay Congressman Teves po.
Okay, Ma'am, 5 po yung pinasok po natin kanina. Ilan po yung nahanap po natin na firearms and explosives? May permit po ba yung mga yun o wala?
Yes, Ma'am Gretchen. Actually po, dito po sa 5 naging subject po ng ating 10 search warrants na nakuha po ng CIDG, may mga ilan po tayong hand grenades. Almost 17 po ang ating firearms na confiscate. Halo na po ito. We have the short and long firearms at yung pong ating mga assorted ammunitions at ilang pang mga assorted magazines po natin. So ito po, dun po sa ating pagkasagawa nito, we have found yung iba pong mga firearms po na registrado or registered under a certain name po nung kasama din po sa ating mga inibitahan na dinatnan during sa implementation po ng ating search warrant. Bagamat kahit ito po ay masasabi natin na may ipinakitang dokumento, ito po ay nasa ilalim ng pangalan ng pag may-ari ng isang tao, subject pa rin po natin ang mga ito for verification po.
Ma'am, sabi po ni Attorney Topacio, they were not allowed, or any representatives of the family were not allowed to witness the operations during the raid. Is this accurate? Your response to this?
Gayon pa man, sir, sa pangyayaring yun, pagkasagawa naman po ng ating CIDG, kasama rin po natin ang iba pa nating local PNP units and together with the Philippine Army, sinikawa po natin ang ating pag-implement ng search warrant with the witness po or kasama po natin ang ibang mga elected officials din po ng lugaring iyon. Masabi pa rin po natin na ang ginawa na pag-implementa ng CITG o ng ating kapulisan ay with regularity pa rin po.
But you mentioned that there were other elected officials invited to who were there to observe and to stand as witness of the raid. But again, to the point of Attorney Topacio, what about the Teveses? Were the Teveses, did they have a representative, a lawyer, or anybody from the family to represent them in that team that was witnessing the actual raid?
Sir, with that context po na tinataas po sa atin ng legal counsel po ay patuloy naman po na hanapin natin kung mangyari man po na merong posibilidad sa kanilang route sa ginawa ng ating mga kapulisan, tayo naman po ay handa na hanapin po ano man po ang maaaring kanilang pananagutan ng CITG o ng ating kapulisan na gumawa ng nag-implement po ng search warrant.
Ma'am, one last question na lang po. How long was the case build up? You said that the warrant obviously was based on intelligence and information that there were unregistered firearms in the premises. For how long have you known about this?
Sir, particularly on that context, sir, it's been a while po na ang ating naman po kapulisan ay nagsagawa at nag-aaral po nito para ma-implement itong search warrant. But as of now, sir, bilang tagapagsalita po ng ating CITG ay wala po akong tuwirang tugon kung sa gaanong katagal na po na ang ating CIG kapulisan ay pumalo po para pag-aral at gawin ang ating mga operations ko na ito.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Colonel Marisa Bruno, Chief of the CIDG Public Information Office.
Meanwhile, fisher folk affected by the oil spill in Oriental Mindoro could now earn money by helping in the cleanup drive. That's from President Bongbong Marcos himself, citing the Cash for Work program, which could serve as a temporary source of income for those affected by the oil spill. But so far, fisher folk participating in the cleanup say it's still unclear when and how much they are going to get paid for their efforts. The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources says around 11,000 fisher folk are affected by the fishing ban brought about by the oil spill.
Alam namin babayaran kami hindi namin alam kung sinong magbabayad sa amin.
Magkano daw?
Wala pa rin sir kami alam kung magkano ang araw namin.
Only 4 out of the 13 affected towns in Pola have been allowed by the Environment Department to participate in the cleanup drive. For their safety, participants were asked to undergo a blood pressure test, sign a waiver, and wear personal protective equipment and respiratory masks. Their target for now is to collect seagrass covered in oil from the spill. The Coast Guard has meanwhile reported that industrial oil leaked from the sunken Princess Empress has reached the shores of Taytay in Palawan, 295 kilometers away from Nawan, Oriental Mindoro.
After the break, take a look at this modern take on the traditional jeepney of a transport group that could entice others to take part in the PUV modernization program. We'll find out more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
You're still watching the big story here on One News. The preliminary investigation into the hazing death of John Matthew Salilig began today. The NBI has meanwhile shared screenshots of conversations among members of the Tau Gamma fraternity leading to the victim's death. Marlene Alcaide with the details.
The 7 suspects in the hazing death of Adamson University student John Matthew Salilig were heavily guarded as they undergo the Justice Department's preliminary investigation into the case. Some of the suspects submitted a counter affidavit, while others asked for an extension. The DOJ is set to decide whether the case should be elevated to the courts. The NBI has meanwhile shared copies of some of the online conversations among members of the Tau Gamma Phi fraternity. It was on February 17th when the group started planning for the welcoming rites for neophytes. They eventually agreed to hold the initiation rites in Binian, Laguna. The group even varnished the paddles that they will eventually be used for the hazing. All fraternity members were even obligated to assist in the preparations. These include the victim, John Matthew. The initiation rites started evening of February 18th. The group chat was quiet for a while when the hazing started, but members of the chat started messaging and calling each other again when Salilig's body began to weaken. One of the members gave advice on how to handle the situation, but they say he might just be making excuses. From Binian, Salilig was transferred to Parañaque at the house of one of the fraternity members. Because of Salilig's weak state, someone advised the group to bite the victim's nail. Another said that Salilig may have to be taken to the hospital, but another replied negative. A few moments later, Salilig lost his life. The last update of a member was that Salilig's body has gone cold. The next day, someone asked to have their conversations deleted, and following that, the frat members began speaking with each other only via call. One of their plans to dispose Salilig's body was to throw it into an open canal in Cavite. But once they decided on the final plan of burying him in a vacant lot, members started leaving the group chat one by one. According to the lawyer of alias Void, his client was only forced to join the initiation rites.
Dinibdiban siya nung pag-suggest na dadalhin sa ospital. May nagsabi din sa kanya na kung hindi mag-cooperate, ikaw isusunod namin.
Justice Secretary Boying Remulla says around 6 other suspects wish to surrender. The NBI is expected to file complaints next week. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
From basketball to volleyball, that's the unique UAAP journey of DLSU Green Archers Benjamin Phillips. But how exactly does he manage being a dual sport athlete? Find out in this report.
Basketball or volleyball? Lucky for Benjamin Phillips of LaSalle, he doesn't have to choose. Right now, the 6'8" just made the official DLSU Green Spikers lineup.
Ben Phillips take it to the
shortly after playing center for the LaSalle basketball team.
Put that on a highlight film.
I don't think a lot of people believed me when I said that I would be playing volleyball. Medyo mahirap yung first 2 weeks, adjustments and things like that. But my team is very, very helpful. My coaches are amazing, so I'm thankful that they were able to take me into their family.
Phillips, a silver medalist in the UAAP 3-on-3 tournament, now joins the club of UAAP athletes with 2 sports on their resume. The recent athlete who completed this feat was Kirk Long of Ateneo, who played in basketball and baseball back in 2008. Sports has always been part of Ben.
We're a basketball family. Yung tatay ko, he played sa Division I sa US, so we really get our basketball from him and our grandfather. And then on the volleyball side, that really comes from my mom, yung nanay ko. So she's the Filipina, galing sa Cebu. So actually, that's the reason why I'm wearing 24 sa volleyball, because that was her number that she played with high school.
Being a 2-sport athlete in the UAAP is extremely tough, especially with the schedule. In the morning, Ben practices 3 hours with the volleyball team and another 3 hours in the evening with basketball. Now, on top of that, he has to juggle his academics and his business back in the United States. But Ben says he's able to do it all with the support of people around him, including his coaches.
In terms of attitude talaga, hindi mo matatawaran yung attitude ni Ben. Pagdating sa training, all out talaga yan. Very hardworking athlete. Kung paano siya sa basketball, ganoon din siya sa volleyball.
With his new role as a volleyball player, Ben knows that the challenges are bound to get tougher, but he has this to say.
I really want to just prove to a lot of people that you can do two sports. Being a dual sport athlete is very, very hard, but if you have time management and you have the perseverance and resilience, then you can do it.
Gretchen Hall, We Are One News.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. Ako po si Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
And we are One News, all sides, all the time.